The Russians continue to push for Avdiivka, and for the third day in a row a number of media sites have been spreading unspeakable nonsense about Avdiivka, one of the strongest fortified areas along the front line, being surrounded. This information began to spread against the backdrop of increased intensity of shelling by the enemy and intensification of their offensive actions. But their offensive in the area of Avdiivka as it began with the fact that they drowned armored recovery vehicle while crossing the river, and continued in the same spirit. Russian troops deployed the offensive as if they were living the last day. The enemy, due to the intensity of fire and quantitative pressure, managed to capture a number of positions that are not critical, but this advance Russian propaganda presents as almost a victory, but there is a nuance. The enemy's losses in the first echelon are simply catastrophic. It is now being counted, but almost all the units that participated in the offensive have lost combat capability. But they are not being withdrawn from their occupied positions, fearing losing what little is captured. Additional forces will be brought in soon. And on how this reserve will show itself, we can talk about further prospects of this offensive. But to date, to the south and southwest of Avdiivka, the enemy has not managed to realize any of the set tasks, in particular, to reach the village of Sivano. In the presence of advancement in the north, they have failed to occupy Stepovo. To establish full fire control over the road 0542 also failed. That is, taking into account the forces expended, the enemy failed to achieve the main objectives of the mass offensive. Nevertheless, this does not mean that the pressure will stop. The Russian command has set a clear task: victory is needed. Most likely, they want to make some kind of mega achievement out of Avdiivka by the end of the year. And this means that the offensive will not stop, even when it will have the character of trampling around one stronghold, strewn around with the biomass of the attackers. There was a second attempt of the enemy to massively hit the flanks, and it ended up about the same as the first, meager advances, given the amount of equipment and personnel involved. But advancing is not equal to gaining a foothold. Around Avdiivka there is now a graveyard of enemy armored vehicles. More than half of all casualties on the front come from this area. Both AFU fighters and officials say that there have never been such assaults on Avdiivka during the war. This offensive again showed the backwardness of the Russian generals. The Russian army fights mainly with meat, instead of organized assaults by small infantry groups along the forest belts. The Russians chose to run at full height in a clear field, as their grandfathers fought. It is safe to assert that Russia lacks the capability to execute large-scale offensive actions, even at the scale of Bakhmut. Of course, you should not relax either. A conscript in a Soviet helmet with a gun still remembers how to shoot and kill, and Russia has almost an infinity of such meat. Nonetheless, the Ukrainian defense forces are effectively maintaining their position on the front, thwarting the ambitions of the occupiers.